A large crowd of people were waiting in the middle of the town square for Pope Olivier IV to make his speech, and in far distance a sniper rifle was being cocked ready to take a shot. Pope Olivier IV made his entrance and approached the microphone. As his speech went on, a quickly piercing was heard and then he suddenly fell backwards. The crowd panicked and started maneuver in multiple directions, trying not get caught in the crossfire. Standing in a corner away from the madness was a cardinal, and he was surveying the chaos. He smirked at them and then retreated into the shadows. Meanwhile, the doctor and Louisa were at a restaurant that's next to the canal. She was unimpressed with food. Bland pasta in what looked like dishwater, and the limoncello tasted like liquidized cheap sherbet. The doctor said that in 2070 the economy had taken a heavy decline since the past 40 years. He then pointed her to the canal and she saw a horrific discovery. There were bodies in the canal floating and bobbing along the surface. He said that the funeral companies must have gone out of business and the public are resorting to dumping their loved ones into the water. She turned back to her food and gently pushed the plate away from her. He agreed to this, and then a waiter came to them to present their bill. He looked at it and nearly fell from his chair. He reached into pocket and presented various alien currencies. The waiter wasn't impressed by this, and the doctor tried to convince him that it'd be worth more than measly euros. The doctor and Louisa walked through the streets of Rome. They then passed a few people crying at a little shrine. He leaned in a little bit and noticed an image of Pope Olivier IV with a few white roses around it. Louisa asked him if it was someone he knew, and he turned to her to say that the Pope has died. An old woman came to him and said that the Pope was actually killed in broad daylight during one of his speeches. The doctor's reaction was quite shocked, and then he and Louisa quickly walked away from the scene. Louisa wondered who would kill the Pope in broad daylight amongst hundreds of people. He said it may be someone taking extreme action against the Catholic Church due to known but hidden controversies, and Louisa asked him what were they. The doctor didn't say and didn't want to get into those murky waters. Amongst the walls were pentagrams sprayed painted in red. The doctor just looked at it thinking hoodlum devil worshippers are running amok, and then he accidentally bumps into the cardinal. He apologized. The cardinal called a pizzy and then went on about the Pope's unfortunate passing. They bid each other farewell and the doctor and Louisa headed off. She turned back and Cardinal Apizzi was just staring at her. She gave a little wave and he waved in return, wriggling his fingers. She thought it was a bit disturbing and a little bit sinister. Later on, the two were looking on some ruined architecture that stood when Louisa caught the eye of a little altar boy roaming on its own and started to follow it. She managed to reach the little boy and asked what he's doing out on his own. Then Cardinal Apizzi emerged out of the shadows and quickly grabbed her by the neck. She struggled to get out of his grasp and then he silenced her with a small bottle of smelling salts which can render someone unconscious. He carried away along with the little boy in tow. The doctor came to the little street and called out for Louisa. He then smelled the smelling salts that still lingered in the air and followed his nose to where Louisa might have gone to. He then saw Cardinal Apizzi from a distance carrying Louisa into a disused cathedral and wondered what was going. A sacrifice or a possession or even a marriage is being held. He needed to get inside. Louisa was placed in a row along with a few other young women in white gowns and Cardinal Apizzi approached them. He started flicking some blood onto them and was chanting something that no one could understand. He then approached a podium and the chanting became more louder. Then a swirl of brownish cloudy smoke started to emerge and Cardinal Apizzi let out a scream of victory. The demon appeared amongst the brown smoke and the smell of a fiery underworld. Louisa along with the other girls looked in terror. Cardinal Apizzi presented to them that the demon is Akon and that the apocalypse will begin. The doctor meanwhile managed to get through one of the back doors of the disused cathedral and somehow ended up at the back where the altar was positioned. He then looked at Akon. Surely not. He remembered when he was exiled to Earth by the Time Lords and faced against the Master at Devil's End, summoning Azal, and he thinks history is repeating all over again. He strolled to where Akon and Cardinal Apizzi were standing. Apizzi tried to prevent the doctor from getting closer but the doctor used some aikido on him. Louisa was pleased that he arrived and then said to her that all hell and fire will be running loose. Akon hobbled forward to the girls and then got hold of the doctor. He threw against on the cathedral's pillars and knocked him out. Louisa shouted for him but he was out cold. Akon sniffed the girls. He kept saying virgin to ones he smelt and then he approached Louisa. He smelled her and then stood back. He left off a shout saying she isn't virgin and she said to him that she lost virginity a long time ago. Akon's demonic powers started to make structure crumble slightly and then turned his attention to Apizzi. Akan strolled towards him and said words of betrayal in a devilish but shouty tone. Apizzi tried to reason with him that he's one of his followers and that his summoning will cause a more greater ordeal. Apizzi betrayed his following to God, the Vatican and the Catholic Church. Turning to the demonic side made him see another level of guidance and that worshipping the devil can give another edge of influence to the millions of people around the world. Akan didn't listen to this and then stabbed his long horned fingernail into Apizzi's forehead. Apizzi screamed in pain. His skull was starting to burn in flames and his skin turned a dark charcoal gray. His body floundered to the floor of the cathedral. The doctor managed to get out of his unconscious state and noticed Apizzi's dead body. He quickly grabbed Louisa and raced out of the cathedral. She looked behind and shouted to him about the other girls. He turned back and saw Akan make his approach the line of young virgins. He said he needs to think of a way of stopping him, and if he can stop one demon he can stop another one again. The doctor took Louisa outside and told her to get back to the TARDIS. She said no. He tried to move her in the opposite direction but she rebuffed and then shouted at him for trying to remove her from the situation he was facing. He gave a stern look at her and gradually okayed her demand. Suddenly an explosion within the cathedral erupted and screeched laughing was starting to emerge. Little imps and scapegraces with wings flown out of the roof. They were now circling round the city and started to unintentionally savagely kill civilians. He told her to run. She'll get caught by them and there will be hundreds lurking in the cathedral. She nodded her head to this and quickly went off to the streets of Rome. The doctor returned to the cathedral. Inside he noticed the young virgins dead and covered in blood. So that's where the scapegraces came from. Akan bred his own demons within the young girls. He looked remorseful at the dead young girls and they were innocent people forced into sacrifice. Louisa meanwhile was racing through the streets. She was yelling to people to run and not get caught by the little demons. She then tripped over something on the ground and fell. When she got up one of the imps was straddling towards her. Panically she got up and tried to escape out of the imp's vision. The doctor approached Akan in the middle of the cathedral and offered himself to be sacrificed. Akan leaned forwards to him and sniffed him. He growled 2 words. Time Lord, and the doctor said yes. Of course he is one of them. Akan let out some words and one of them was kill. The doctor knew this and tried to slowly walk backwards to the cathedral's entrance. Akan got hold of him and dragged him to the podium where he emerged from. Before Akan could kill him, the doctor managed to get out of his grasp, quickly grabbed a nearby wooden cross and pointed it at him. Akan sneering said the doctor's got no faith. The doctor took rapid deep breaths and closed his eyes. He thought of his time at Maiden's Point and then his eyes opened. He muttered the words have faith and then Akan started to feel something like a wave of psychic energy. Then he suddenly turned his demonic powers against him like self-suicide upon himself and the doctor just stepped back. Akan's body started to twist and turn. Then he exploded into flames and the remains of him got sucked into a small portal that appeared earlier when he was summoned. The doctor got his breath again and headed out of the cathedral. The scapegraces started to explode on the ground and in the sky due to their link with Akan. Once the scapegraces vanished for good, the doctor headed off, leaving the remains of the disused cathedral behind. He reached the TARDIS. Louisa was there sitting on the ground and leapt up when she saw him. She was glad that he survived and asked how did he do it. The doctor just said you have to have faith when dealing with demonic forces. It was something he only found in his recent incarnation, and be reminded that he still had it in him came in handy. He then said to her that she'll need to get out of that white gown. It brought up memories of Victoria and Sarah Jane. Little things like that can trigger memories of his previous lives, and Louisa understood this. After all, he's something 500 years old. The doctor corrected her, saying he's 956 years old. When she entered in the TARDIS, he leaned the doors and looked at the city. Pity that humankind has gone down the toilet. Politics, religion and other things can turn the world into a near-dead society. He entered in and quietly uttered the word ciao as he looked back at the future he'd seen. He then closed the doors.